D-Day at Tarawa is published by Decision Games. The game was designed by John Butterfield and the map graphics by Joe Youst. The game recreates the US invasion of the Gilbert Islands in November 1943. The Battle of Tarawa is not the most famous battle in the Pacific, but it was arguably the bloodiest. The 2nd Marine Division suffered over 1,000 casualties per day. In the end, over 1,000 killed in action and 2,391 wounded. The Japanese lost nearly 5,000 killed in action. And all of this took place on a small atoll with an area measuring only 291 acres.
This is the map of the game, and it will look unlike any other Hex and Counter wargame map you've ever seen, unless you're familiar with the series. What you see in colours, blue, green, red, brown, yellow and purple, are the Japanese firing positions. And we'll have a closer look. Here we have a close-up of the map and how the fire positions work. You'll notice this green position. The solid dots are its field of fire and line of sight where it has intense fire. If the green position fires, any American unit up to the number of Japanese units in the position will be hit in those intense fire hexes. Here you'll see a broken fire dot. That means steady fire, and steady fire extends out into the water as well. If an American unit is caught in one of those positions when the Japanese fire, they're hit if their unit symbol corresponds with the symbol on the fire card, which is either a diamond, a circle or a triangle. You'll also notice that some positions are multiples. This blue position is joined by tunnels, which are shown as broken blue dots on the map. That is one position that includes two hexes. Likewise, the green position is one position, two hexes. The red is one position, three hexes. If any of those hexes are occupied by Americans or Japanese, the position is considered to be occupied, and that becomes important when you're working the AI. Another thing you'll notice are these artillery symbols. They are the positions of Japanese artillery. The L stands for light artillery, usually anti-aircraft guns. The H is for heavy, the M is for medium. On fire cards, it will sometimes tell you if the Japanese hold and occupy enough certain artillery positions, they will fire artillery at the American forces. Probably the last thing to show is the letters C and this letter I. On all of the artillery positions and all of the C positions, Japanese coastal units are placed in the setup to defend. On the I's, the non-coastal or more elite Japanese units begin the game in those positions. And that's pretty much an overview of how that part of the map works. Another area that can cause some confusion with the map is out at sea, out in the water or along the reef. And you'll see all of these different colours and coloured lines. What all they mean is within a border, it'll tell us which coastal position colours can fire steady fire into those hexes. And when you jump across into another area, then it's these four colours, red, yellow, green and brown. Over here what a death zone. 5 different colours can fire into these 3 hexes. It's steady fire, so if there are no units for the Japanese to fire at on the beach or on the atoll, then they'll go searching for targets out in the water and hit the targets if there are any of the corresponding symbol. The other thing to point out in this view is these squares. They're called crash hexes. Basically, that's where an LVT will stop and disgorge its cargo into the water if it gets a water result during the amphibious landing stage. It happens and the troops then have to wade ashore under fire. Here we can have a look at some of the American units. The first unit is a hero unit. These depict real Marines that fought and distinguished themselves in the actual battle. When you get the opportunity through events to place heroes, the hero gives the unit it is attached to special abilities. Basically, it can move whenever it wants to, and gets free action, in other words, and the hero also confers an advantage in close combat. Over here we have an example of a Marine company. The first thing to note is the 4 pips. That's when it's at full strength. This is its counter when it's reduced down to 2. When it takes its first hit, it's flipped. When this one is hit, it's flipped to the one side, and after 4 hits, it's eliminated. You'll notice the symbol is a triangle. That's the symbols I've talked about with regard to steady fire, to see if a unit is hit. The numbers, the first number is its firepower, 7 and then 3. The second number is its range. When it's at full strength, the unit has heavy machine guns and mortars and various other things and can fire at range. The last thing to point out on this unit is the numbers on the right, 17 and R2. The 17 is the turn it's scheduled to appear as a reinforcement, and R2 means the beach approach that it will set up in and try and land from. The next unit is an engineer unit. This particular one is a support engineer unit, becomes important from turn 11 onwards. Other engineers have flamethrowers. They're heavy support troops for the infantry. Next is a medium tank unit of the Shermans that went ashore, and you can see it has a 4 and a 7. 4 is its firepower, 7 is its range. The tank units only have 2 pips. The last is a artillery unit. You'll notice the E. It only comes in as a result of events. Historically, they had a huge problem trying to move heavy equipment across the reef, but they did manage to manhandle some guns onto the beach, and they're depicted by random events. Now we can have a close-up look at the Japanese units. On the left here are inland units, and the dark red depicts them as elite units. Elite units are a little more difficult to get rid of. They tend to withdraw and come back later. Next are the units with the Cs on them. These are coastal defenders. There is a few elite units mixed in with the Cs. Then you have tank units. There's 3 of those. And then you have depth markers which add depth and strength to the position they stack underneath units. The next thing to notice is these letters on their bottom left side. They correspond to tactics or weapons that are required to deal with them. For instance, the CC stands for close combat. That unit has to be assaulted. You could suppress it with just attacking it with firepower, but you won't get rid of it. This one here needs mortars and bazookas. So as long as the units attacking it have mortars and bazookas, among other things, then they have the weapons requirements to destroy that unit. And there are many of them. This one requires demolition, this one requires machine guns, this one requires a flamethrower. This one, the tank, requires artillery, which can come from either naval fire support or from tanks, which count as artillery. When the depth markers are placed, they're placed face down, and you don't know what they are. When they're flipped, they not only add strength, but they also can add requirements. This one means the position has to be flanked, which means it has to be hit from two adjacent hexes that aren't adjacent to each other. All of these things start cascading where you need multiple things to deal with a position, and it's part of the fun of the game and the problem of trying to work out how to clear some of these Japanese positions. They can prove quite tough. The next thing to walk through is the engine room of the game. There are no dice in this game, it's all run by the cards. And the cards have several sections depending on which point in the turn order we're in. The first, the top part, is the landing section. To see how an LVT and its cargo fare on the run to the beach, you draw one card to see if it drifts off its line. In this case, it would drift one hex to the right. And then you draw a second card, which tells you what the result is. How many steps, up to 4, make it, where they end up, in this case on the beach, and how many steps of the LVT survive. It requires 2 points of LVT or a full LVT unit to carry 4 pips. The next section is the event section. For the first 10 turns there is one event phase, and from turn 11 onwards there are 2 event phases. A card is drawn and you simply apply the event depending on what turn it is. The next part is the Japanese firing, and you would recall I talked about the symbols. In this case it would be looking to hit triangles, American units with triangles in those steady fire zones. This one tells us that red positions with at least one Japanese unit will fire, purple positions with at least 2 Japanese units, and remembering units include depth markers, will fire, and brown positions with 1. The letters R, I and M, they're special additional actions that occur as the game progresses, and when we get to them I'll explain them. The last section is the artillery that I spoke about. On this card, if the Japanese have 1 heavy plus 6 of any other type of artillery still in play and manned by Japanese units, they will fire. They tend to search for their targets out in the beach approach hexes just off the reef, and if they can't find a target there, they work their way into the water and then onto the beach looking for an appropriate target. First part of setup is to place the Japanese coastal defenders. So we get all the units that have C's, mix them all together, and then place them on all of the hexes that have a C on them, an L, an M or an H. Next step is to determine where the tanks will go. So we randomise the tanks. And draw a fire card. Red, purple and brown. The tanks are revealed and the units begin the game disrupted. Which essentially means suppressed. Next part is the Japanese inland or elite units, even though there is a spattering of elite units out on the coast. These go on all the positions marked with an I, including those tank positions that weren't taken up by a tank. You know you got it right if you have 4 units remaining. They go into the Japanese reserve units box along with all of the depth markers. Next is to make sure that Admiral Shibasaki is in command. And the final part is to put action I on turn 11 and then get the other actions, randomise them and place them turn 3, turn 5, turn 7 and turn 9. Last step is to place the US first wave in the beach approach hexes and begin play. And that's for the next episode.